All right, so Dr. Stephen Thomas Joseph Lanka, virologist, PhD, 7 primary publications on ResearchGate, genome structure of a virus, single-stranded regions in the genome. Like I said, he deals with genetics and viruses, co-proteins. So he is a medical professional that has been doing this job for a very long time. Now, he is a proponent, as best I can tell, of terrain theory as opposed to germ theory. And to get an idea of how he thinks, I will read an article that quotes him from published March 2003. This is on the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. It's a peer-reviewed. So, rapid response: Peter Flegg grossly misrepresented Stefan Lanka out of context. For the second time at BMJ Rapid Responses, Peter Flegg has grossly misrepresented Stefan Lanka by citing him out of context. Quote, "Forgive me if I find it quite ironic that a writer, artist, philosopher suggests to a postdoctoral PhD fellow in infectious diseases that he should sadly obtain any form of education in the field in order to appreciate that HIV does not exist, while quoting a virologist, Lanka, who believes that viruses, which are claimed to be very dangerous, in fact do not exist at all, as the source for his evidence," end quote. Continuing, "I do not find it quite ironic, but merely a public display of Flegg's ignorance here. One has to study virology in the first place to realize where virology has gone wrong. Lanka does not lazily accept our dominant fashionable virological paradigms, whereas Bennett and Flegg do. They believe what they are told in textbooks. Flegg as a physician and Bennett as a postdoctoral PhD fellow in infectious diseases have a curiously naive and layman's common sense worldview of what constitutes virology and viruses. They still believe what they are told in textbooks without doing their own deconstructive critiques. Yet again, Flegg lifts quotes out of context and thus distorts the meaning of what Lanka and I are actually saying. My original quote was from Dr. Stefan Lanka. I had already had a somewhat critical attitude when I started studying molecular genetics." And again, this is Dr. Stefan Lanka here. Quote, "I already had a somewhat critical attitude when I started studying molecular genetics, so I went to the library to look up on the literature of HIV. To my big surprise, I found that when they are speaking about HIV, they are not speaking about a virus. They are speaking about cellular characteristics and activities of cells under very special conditions. I was so deeply shocked. So for a long time I studied virology from the beginning to the end, to be absolutely sure that there was no such thing as HIV. And it was easy for me to be sure about this because I realized that the whole group of viruses to which HIV is said to belong, the retroviruses, as well as other viruses which are claimed to be very dangerous, in fact do not exist at all." End quote. Stefan Lanka, interviewed by Mark Gabrish Conlin, Zangers Magazine, San Diego, October 1998. Lanka raises legitimate questions here that need to be addressed. What exactly is a virus? What evidence is there that Ebola is a real isolated virus? It could even be argued that Ebola was a man-made laboratory artifact, as Dr. Leonard G. Horowitz has claimed. I asked Flegg, what constitutes a virus? Who authorizes the peer reviewing and policing of the taxonomic classification of viruses? Who in authority authorizes the authors of viruses? What is a virus? What are the politics of virus inventing? After all, today science is totally corrupted by politics. Who says so? To clarify the complex situation of Flegg, I conclude with what Dr. Stefan Lanka wrote in December 2001. Quote, "In the case of the influenza, herpes, vaccinia, polio, adeno, and Ebola viruses, each photo shows only a single particle. Nobody claims that they're isolated particles, let alone particles that have been isolated from humans. In summary, it must be said that these photos are an attempt of fraud committed by the researchers and medical scientists involved, as far as they assert that these structures are viruses or even isolated viruses. To what extent the involved journals and authors of textbooks have contributed to this fraud knowingly, or only out of gross negligence, I don't know. Everyone who starts as a researcher in the medical literature will quickly will quickly encounter statements and references that Koch's first postulate can't be fulfilled. How these authors who claim the existence of viruses could overlook that remains a riddle. Could it be that the term contagium, meaning gift, as in poison or toxin, virus, from the 18th and 19th century was applied to the 20th century to the cell components which were named viruses since the electron microscope was introduced in 1931? And in order to hide this, the disease-causing viruses have often been described but never been isolated. And then they were used as seemingly logical explanations for poisonings and adverse effects of vaccination. As Lemon writes about the symptomatic of hepatitis B, which was observed for the first time in 1985 following smallpox vaccinations, and 1938 following measles vaccinations. The copies in the textbooks show only structures within cells, and nothing that looks like the isolation and thus homogeneous. The biochemical characterization, which is crucial, lacks completely. Dr. Stephen Lanka exposes the viral fraud, pictures of isolated viruses debunked, December 2001. So, Flegg, as a physician, and Bennett, as a postdoctoral PhD, this actually goes on longer than I thought it did. Okay, so, this is really good, though. I'm going to keep going. Flegg, as a physician, and Bennett, as a postdoctoral PhD fellow in infectious diseases, are obviously not going to admit that they made a tragic mistake and inform patients and the public alike that HIV is not an infectious virus, but endogenous epiphenomena. They are interpolated and seemingly trapped within the HIV paradigm and refuse to re-educate themselves but continuously repeat the mythical HIV mantra. The taxonomic classification of HIV 22 to 23 May 1996 was ostensibly a political move and a strategic invention to present a nomenclature that would unify a diversely identified putative retrovirus. Human T-cell lymphotropic virus type 3, HTLV3. Immunodeficiency-associated virus, IDAV, AIDS-associated retrovirus, and lymphadenopathy. Jeez, man, why do they do this? Lymphadenopathy, Jesus. Associated virus. The not-so-hidden agenda behind this politically expedient move was to enforce the belief that an alleged human retrovirus created immunodeficiency. Thus, the manufacturing of HIV hegemonic misinformed consent reinforced a retroviral episteme for AIDS causation. Okay, look. I don't like this man's grammar. What you're getting out of this is that the entire thing about viruses, the entire thing about the modern day germ theory, is that it's been used. Right? It's incorrect, and it's been used by the medical industry, particularly the pharmaceutical arm, because that's what it all is based around. Problem, reaction, solution. You have a problem, this virus. We have the fucking solution, this vaccine. So here, even though Stefan Lanka doesn't have his own Wikipedia page, David Bardens does. So when you type in Stefan Lanka, I shit you not. Let me see how to spell his name. Stefan. This is what you get, is David Bardens, because, the narrative always has to be controlled, because you can never just have an open conversation about anything that goes against the mainstream paradigm, because we don't live in a world based on free speech. We live in a world based on paradigms and money and using people like cattle. So David Bardens, German doctor whose case was reported. So what happened is that Stefan Lanka had put forth a €100,000 challenge whereby anybody, did I say everybody? Everybody and anybody was openly invited to prove the existence of the measles virus. Specifically, that it's a virus, right? So Stefan Lanka puts out this challenge to the world. David Bardens takes it up. I'm sure quite a few people tried. He submits six scientific publications, and ultimately so Lanka refuses to accept these as proof. David Bardens takes him to court. The first court rules in favor of Bardens and says that Lanka lost. He has to pay the fee, $100,000 over to Bardens. Then they take it to the higher court. Let's see if I can. Court's ruling received global press attention in light of the heavy. Lanka eventually appealed the judgment. The case was reevaluated at the higher regional court, February 2016, where the original judgment was reversed. Right? So they ended up. Bardens commented on the case in an extensive interview, announced his decision to appeal to Germany's federal court. This is Germany's Supreme Court. So they took it all the way up to the German Supreme Court. But the court saw no reason to revise the ruling. So they take it all the way to the Supreme Court, who ultimately rules in favor of Stefan. Come on, man. Okay. For every time I try to highlight that name, Stefan Lanka is who they rule in favor of, which is to say that, again, he puts out €100,000 challenge to the entire world just to prove the existence of the measles virus, and they fail to do it. And the Supreme Court of Germany holds up in favor of Stefan. To this day, if you were to look it up, of course, what they're going to tell you, right? You type in his name, and you come up with a picture of him, but then the first thing talks about David, labels Stefan an anti-vaccine activist, doesn't talk about his credentials, anything like that. So even though I typed in Stefan's name, first article I get is about David. And the first abstract, the anti-vaccine activist, because that's, like I said, we live in a world of controlled narratives and buzzwords. German court orders, this is the second result, Germany court orders measles skeptic to pay €100,000 €100,000. So instead of saying doctor, they say measles skeptic, anti-vaccine activist. He's a doctor, is what he is. He's a doctor. Okay. Fact check, German judges did not. This one says that the judges ruled in favor of like a civil dispute that had nothing to do with, like, they're arguing semantics. Right? They're just arguing semantics. So it's funny to see how controlled the narrative is. Keep in mind, everything that I read about Lanka and those responses came straight from the British Medical Journal. Articles posted on the British Medical Journal. So people like Stephen are proponents of exosomes, like terrain theory is what I say. So you have germ theory and you have terrain theory, and terrain just pertains to the entirety of the body, saying that you keep your vessel clean, right? You don't poison yourself and you take care of it and you won't get sick. It's the classic argument, the big realization that a lot of people have been coming to about just how corrupt our medical organization is, or medical sector across the world, right? Not just in one country, but all across the world. We teach the notion that, or we basically teach people how to take care of symptoms instead of treating the actual source of illness, right? So the thing about exosomes is that they were discovered after the establishment of viruses, even though viruses were never actually proven to exist. Right? They weren't. So you have the discovery of exosomes, which are basically identical to viruses, but which are completely natural to the human body. They're not like some foreign invader. And they get expelled as like a sort of natural cleansing process of the body. Right? So I'm going to be publishing more as I continue to learn and single out particular articles or books or whatnot. I already have a couple lined up that I'm going to be reading, so I'll be talking more about this. But it's just funny because you have this whole like people focusing on basically like the wrong causes of things. So for like Dr. Stephen Campbell or John Campbell, sorry, Stefan Lanka, but John Campbell, I've been posting videos recently talking about how, you have this dude who goes and shows that vaccines are actually causing more illness, right? Which I've said before, but yeah, no shit. Like once you have your eyes opened up and you understand these things a little bit, well, of course they are. You're injecting illnesses into yourself. Not just the illness, you're injecting a bunch of foreign molecules, some aqueous solution into your veins. Yeah. Or not literally your veins, but you know what I'm saying. Of course, that's going to cause issues. Like, it's not surprising to me. But unfortunately, he also still buys the virus narrative. And he's talking about, this whole Wuhan conspiracy where they think that, like, a lab leak occurred in Wuhan. It's like, none of that, like, that's all a narrative. Like, none of that matters. You saw the results of the lockdowns. You saw what actually happened. And I really don't need to explain too much of that to people that are already aware. It doesn't matter necessarily where it came from. I think what's more interesting is the fact that it doesn't really exist in the first place, and that you can just market a bunch of bullshit to people that doesn't actually have any relation to real life whatsoever. You can shut down the entire world's economy and lock people indoors and get them to take injections that have nothing to do with anything. Literally, just randomly doing this. I think that's far more interesting than the whole Wuhan conspiracy leak. So, yeah. Unfortunately, people like this, they're very valuable, but they don't see the bigger picture yet. They don't see just how deep it goes, because it's like a never-ending rabbit hole of lies and fucking treachery and deceit, all in the name of money. Really, man, there's no great reason for it. So that's all I got for now. Much love.